for joining my session, especially 15 minutes before lunch. I know you guys are hungry, so don't worry, I'm gonna make you just a bit more hungry, hopefully for something else. So hi everyone, my name is Barak, I'm a full stack team lead at Cyera. And in the next 15 minutes, I'm not gonna bombard you with some new AI tools and the vision for the next 5 years, not at all. I'm gonna be super pragmatic. I'm gonna introduce to you 2 awesome tools that we utilize within our company that helped us reduce repetitive UI work, improve developers' velocity, but most importantly, focus on what truly matters. If by the end of this 15-minute session, one of you may take some of the things I'm gonna show you today back home and apply, I did my job, I consider the session a win. Now there's the clicker. Few words about Cyera because I think context really matters here. When I joined Cyera, we were around 20 people, and in less than 4 years, we became 1,100 employees worldwide, and we continue to intensively grow this time. I'm sure you saw our impressive booth over there. And it has a reason. The reason is we managed to position ourselves as a market leader in one of the hottest topics of today's AI industry, cybersecurity industries, which is AI security, data security, and data loss prevention. Now, I know I said a lot of cybersecurity jargon here, so let me just say it very simply. We simply help organizations know where their sensitive data is. Now, it may come as a surprise that this is even a problem, but apparently, if you're an enterprise with petabytes of data spread across multiple cloud providers, you don't really know where your sensitive data is. SaaS, on-prem servers. And if you don't know where your sensitive data is, you don't really know how to protect it. And if you don't know how to protect it, then you know what happens. So what we do at Cyera is we provide full visibility for enterprises to know exactly where the data is, especially the sensitive data, let them know what the issues are surrounding the data storage, and then eventually we help them solve these issues. And with a proper integration set up in place, we solve it for them automatically. So this is the power of Cyera. Cyera is a proud sponsor of this conference, and I'm super happy and proud to represent us here at this stage. So thank you very much for joining. So very quick disclaimer. I don't know if all of you know this, but we were supposed to be gathering here at this stage half a year ago. But due to the conflict with Iran, we postponed it justifiably, and now we're here. But 2 weeks ago, I've been looking at my slides, and I figured that my slides are no longer relevant. I plan to talk about Cursor guidelines. Agents just came out. So in other words, either common knowledge now or irrelevant. So I had to completely change my session today. So if there's one thing I can guarantee to you about my session today, is that it may not be relevant half a year from now. But I encourage you to stay tuned because it is super relevant today. All right, so let's get down to business. You know, we are bombarded with AI tools today, and it's very hard to keep up with the pace, but I decided to choose 2 of them that we decided to implement in our company. And I decided these 2 for 3 reasons. So number 1, they're obviously super relevant to React developers. Number 2, these are really low-hanging fruits. In other words, you can take these back, and I'll show you to you in a minute. You can take these back and set those up in your company in less than a few hours, and the value that you're gonna get is immense. And the third reason is that these 2 really complement one another. And I'm gonna show you how. So I heard a saying somewhere, it goes something like this, and you don't have to agree with this. If you find yourself doing the same thing more than twice, you should probably automate it. Now I know it's a bit extreme, but you gotta admit that there's a sense of truth in it. Because as front-end developers, if you work in a company, you probably work with designers. And whenever you get a new feature, you basically do the same thing. You gotta make sure that your web application or mobile application looks exactly like the designer intended it. Now, you probably see where I'm going with this, so don't worry, I'm not gonna take away our jobs yet. I love developing components. That's my therapeutic session between me and myself, I know. But you gotta admit that if we had some very good tool that would effectively improve this and allow us to do it faster, then you would surely agree to start using it. So I decided to very quickly try a very naive approach some of you may already tried it and you know that it doesn't really work. I decided to connect my agent to the Figma MCP. We are using Figma, but my session is not vendor locked to Figma. It could be any design system software. And what I basically tried is, and I have expectations, I figured how to do it. I learned about MCP servers, MCP protocol, and I'm not going to deep dive too much about what MCP means, but in a nutshell, it's a protocol that allows you to connect your agent to external tools or internal tools, depends on if you develop some. And so I did try to do the example that you're now seeing on the screen. This is an actual screenshot in one of the pages of our platform where we show the customer the sensitive data that we found. And I'm expecting that these components, which are repetitive, they already exist in my code base, and I wanted to reuse them. I don't want to recreate them. Do you have a guess what it turned out? Was I satisfied with the code? What do you think? Absolutely not. So I tried it a few attempts and a few other attempts, and basically what happens is that you get a very fine UI code, actually. When you execute the code that is generated, it looks pretty good most of the times. And it makes sense, because what you get from the Figma MCP server are all the design layouts, because Figma is aware of all the design. However, your Figma is not aware of your code. So what happens is, whenever you attempt to do this, you basically ask your LLM to look at all of your code base and match it to specific styling components within Figma. And that is a heavy task for your LLM. And we all know that context today really matters, right? And I didn't provide my LLM any context. So I tried a few attempts, and it didn't work well, so I decided to put it aside and move on with my life. A few weeks go by. Ishai joins our company. Ishai is our front-end tech lead. And I represent him this problem, and then he goes like, well, why don't you use Code Connect? And I'm like, what's Code Connect? So apparently, Code Connect is a tool that allows you to match between Figma components to your code components. And not only that, it allows you to actually map between the component properties. If you properly utilize Figma in your company, you could actually define, your designer could actually define properties of each component to your actual code component. And as you can see, this is a screenshot of our button component, one of its variants on the left side. And on the right side, where you usually see the styling definitions, you could actually see an accurate code representation of that specific instance. And not only that, whenever you change a property within Figma, if your designer decides to choose a different variant, the code is automatically changed within Figma. So basically, even before AI, I spared you some documentation efforts. But you may ask, well, how does it help me with AI code generation? Like, how does it improve my generated code? Well, it turns out that the MCP server not only returns the styling definitions now, it actually returns all the code definitions, the import paths, and the design system tokens that you're using. So you just basically leverage and bootstrap your agent completely. So before I show you a real example, let me just say how you could properly install this. So option number one that Figma offers is what they call Code Connect UI. And this is the simplest setup. Basically what you do here is you connect your Figma to your GitHub repository or GitLab, whatever you're using. And then the next step, you iterate through all your Figma components and match their respective file. This is basically really good, and you get a lot of value already by doing this. However, remember I mentioned earlier that components also actually have properties. But with this setup, you don't really match between component properties. You just match between files. So you still make your LLM make all the guesswork to trying to match between properties of Figma to properties of code. So what we ended up doing is using the second approach that Figma offers, which is through CLI and declarative mapping files. So this approach is basically about creating a declarative file per component that not only you match between a component to the actual URL where it sits in Figma, you get to actually match between the properties. So if your designer decided to create a property for a link, let's say disabled, laser doesn't work, doesn't matter, with a capital D, and in your code it's lowercase d, then you could do this. And with proper CI/CD in place, you could actually publish this automatically whenever you deploy and ship a new component or update the interface of any new component. So this is really cool. Figma offers you a complete comparison between the two approaches, and this is like the main thing I want to convince you to do, and that is the Code Connect CLI offers way more things. Matter of fact, if you don't go with the second approach, you cannot get the examples that I showed you earlier from within Figma. So we also get dynamic code examples and property matching. So now after you set this up, you actually get code generated that is actually good. Even on first attempts, I was surprised by how good it is. I discussed about like the documentation that you get out of it, but what you really get here is a super confidence generating complete layouts. In other words, not just components, but actual layouts full of components. And I took this naive example just to show you. I copied like the link of that specific buttons container, and you could see that on line 3, it actually imports the button correctly and reuses it according to the variant of every usage. First one is a lean button, second one is a primary button. So that is really cool. And it also works really nice for bigger layouts. Few weeks to know before you go to your organization and attempt to set this up. Number one, this is a team effort for you and your designers. If your Figma is not properly utilized, if your layouts doesn't really reference to your design system components and you don't define Figma properties, then that is not going to work because obviously your agent is not getting all the data it needs. Secondly, there's no way to skip this. You have to actually map between Figma components to your code components. That's a one-time effort, but it is relatively short, and you should do it. And as I said, I really recommend the second approach. Okay, so we talked about this. Now let's take it a step forward. You know, we all have these small tasks that we never get to do, all those low priority spacing fixes that we never have the time to properly prioritize. And sometimes we even have those urgent tasks that are small. We think of them like 5 minutes effort, but then we deep dive into them and the context switch and the CI/CD, and then it takes us 30 minutes to an hour. Background agents became really popular today. I'm not sure if all of you are using it, but in a nutshell, it is simply an agent that runs in the cloud, remotely. In other words, you could activate an action, go back and drink some coffee, and then something happens. When I say something, especially because not always the right result. And there are plenty of ways to implement background agents within your organization, but one of the cool things you could do here now that you have proper Code Connect defined, you could actually connect your background agent to your Figma MCP server. And what happens is that you get way more confident closing all of those small tasks. As a matter of fact, so confident that we actually offer our product managers to start utilizing it. And it works pretty well. So if I were you, I would go and simply use something like this. I would utilize this. By the way, you cannot say my session today is not relevant. That thing is last week news. Claude announced this last Wednesday, an integration between Slack that allows you to create pull requests out of thread context. Maybe with Microsoft Teams, if you use it. And if you don't want to use Claude, there are alternatives with CursorAI extensions and I think Copilot as well. However, at Cyera, we couldn't use this because what happens is at Cyera, we have to abide by very strict security regulations. And that plug and play, which is unfortunately so easy to install, we cannot use because the agents run in the Claude servers or Cursor servers, and we have to run them internally within our own cloud. This is not too much React content, so I don't want to deep dive into our architecture. We basically run our agents on AWS Bedrock. We trust AWS, and we also trust GitHub, so we could do this in this way. But what I mean by showing you this slide is that don't be afraid of strict regulation. If your company is also like our company and it has to follow strict regulations, feel free to approach me or Omri, who's at this stage here, and consult with us, and we have some solutions. All right, so I'm going to be really quick. I just showed you today Figma's Code Connect, which allows you to generate high-quality code. and combined with background agents that I encourage you to start using and creating if you haven't already, creates a huge amplification and allows you to boost your development, increase developer velocity, and most importantly, focus on what really, truly matters to you. Thank you so much, and bon appetit.